Hello and welcome to our poster session, Using Virtual Communities of Practice to Support Technical Assistance. My name is Eliza Leibel, and I'm joined by my colleague Terry Marks, and we're from the National Center on Intensive Intervention. We hope that this poster will help you to identify the critical components of a successful community of practice and understand the benefits of using a virtual community of practice for intensive intervention implementation efforts. So what is a community of practice and how does that translate virtually? Communities of practice, or COPs, are collaborative affinity groups that come together to share, learn, and create change. And while COPs have existed for centuries, they have only recently been utilized in virtual settings. Virtual COPs provide a unique opportunity to bring together educators, both across the country and within states, to share how they are tackling situations in which there is a lack of robust research, such as sharing promising practices for remote instruction that have shown positive results with students. During the pandemic, NCII used virtual communities of practice in 3 different ways. The first way was an educator level COP focused on identifying and testing out strategies to support remote intensive intervention. The second was state-specific communities of practice within NCII's partner states focused on building knowledge and skills of local leaders and educators to implement intensive intervention. And the third community of practice was a cross-state COP tailored for NCII's state partners to explore ways to continue their implementation amidst the pandemic. Next, Terry will share a little bit about some lessons learned from this.
Great, thanks, Eliza. So we definitely had to think, and everybody had to think a little bit differently about how to best reach their audiences and best reach their technical assistance partners right at the start of the pandemic. And so one of the ways that we did that was through that first educator level community of practice that Eliza mentioned. And what we were able to do was reach out within our community of states to educators that may or may not have been participating in activities related to intensive intervention with sites, but just generally were interested in learning more about how to do this, and brought them together. And so myself and my colleague Sarah Arden, we facilitated that one, and we're going to share a couple lessons learned from that. First, we recognized the critical importance of incentivizing participation. What that community of practice was intended to do was to first really help us understand the local context, the local understanding of how intensive intervention needed to be implemented. And so we knew that we needed to include teachers. Our travel budget was completely thrown off because of the COVID pandemic. And so we were able to flex those monies and give those back to the educators in our states through honoraria to participate. And what we had them do in return was try out various strategies that we were thinking would be successful based on our work with data-based individualization. And then they would produce some sort of evidence that they were able to complete that activity and share that back. In our state-specific COPs, we had a couple different examples that were kind of operating. So for example, in Wyoming, the community of practice was a comprehensive professional development series for educators in the state that included developing a plan for intensive intervention, implementation, ensuring the fidelity of their actual delivery, as well as progress monitoring. And then within that COP and within that model, we were also able to offer open door sessions for coaches that were actually supporting the implementation to support one another. So again, thinking about that, the key being the participant focus. In another state, Texas, NCII partnered with the state education agency to hold a community of practice for local educators, local administrators, to boost understanding and application of data-based individualization, which is the center's process for delivering intensive intervention. So there are a couple different, you can already see a couple different focus areas. One more at the educator and teacher level, some were more focused on that administrator piece. So the third COP was this cross-state COP, and this is the one where we brought together all 9 of our intensive TA state partners, and they talked about their implementation journey, not just during the pandemic and how that influenced their implementation, but the history of their implementation from their onset of whenever they started working with the center. And this allowed our state level folks to hear from each other about ways that they were connecting with local partners, ways that they were actually engaging in virtual COPs with their educator or administrators as well. And so it really allowed them the opportunity to share with one another. And I think like that's some of the biggest pieces and takeaways is communities of practice are less about us as TA providers and what we can provide, and more about that community. It's capitalizing on that collective expertise in learning. It's talking about things that are really relevant to those end users. And it's a flexible model where we can even record and share it with others. And so it's been a really great lesson for us as a center to think about the utility of communities of practice moving forward as another component to our technical assistance. So we're really excited about the potential for communities of practice, and hope that others are just as excited about it as well. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of the data and results and what we're seeing as a result of participating in these communities of practice. Eliza, can you share a little bit about where folks can find more information about some of the resources?
Sure. So in a few of our COPs, both our partners and local educators helped us develop resources, some of them specific to providing support during the pandemic, and others more state specific. And all these resources can be found on our website at intensiveintervention.org. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you learned something from our poster session.
Thanks, everyone.